Okay guys, today what I'm going to do for you in this little short video is I'm going to explain to you how the heart muscle itself, the myocardium, receives its blood supply. So the heart is a muscle and it's alive, and therefore, just like any other part of the body, it needs oxygenated blood to survive. The heart muscle itself receives its oxygenated blood through the coronary arteries. And you have two main coronary arteries. You have the left main coronary artery and the right main coronary artery. And here's the important piece. The openings to the coronary arteries, both right and left, originate at the base of the aorta. So you have here, you have the left ventricle, right? And the left ventricle has oxygenated blood in it. So when the left ventricle contracts and sends the oxygenated blood out to the cells of the body, when it contracts, it has to open up, force open the aortic valve. And the aortic valve has little leaves on it. And when the left ventricle contracts, the pressure generated by the left ventricle contracting forces open the aortic valve, and you send O2-rich blood to the cells of the body. So, if you look, the openings to the coronary arteries originate at the base of the aorta. So if I show you this little video here, hopefully it'll make more sense. So you got the two main coronary arteries that supply oxygenated blood to the heart muscle. So in this video here, you have the aortic valve, and then you have the aorta, and then this is an outline of the coronary arteries. And again, the openings to the coronary arteries originate at the base of the aorta. So here, not shown in this picture, would be your left ventricle. So when the left ventricle contracts, it's going to have to force open that aortic valve. So observe. So the left ventricle is going to contract, and it's going to force open the aortic valve. And when the aortic valve is opened from the left ventricle contracting, it's going to send oxygenated blood to the cells of the body. But as you can see, the leaflets of the aortic valve block the openings to the coronary arteries. So when the left ventricle is contracting, oxygenated blood is not feeding the heart muscle through the... When the left ventricle contracts, it's going to open up those coronary arteries and block blood flow through the coronary arteries. So no oxygenated blood is getting to the myocardium, the heart muscle, during ventricular systole. However, what are the two things that muscle can do? It can contract and relax. And when the left ventricle relaxes, the blood in the aorta, that O2 rich blood in the aorta, is going to fall back down during ventricular diastole relaxation, and it's going to snap the aortic valve shut. And then what it's going to do is reveal the openings to the coronary arteries. And that O2 rich blood then will supply the heart muscle. So the heart muscle will receive its oxygenated blood during ventricular diastole. So don't write ventricular diastole. What I'm asking for is the explanation. And the explanation is this. When the left ventricle, which is full of oxygenated blood, sends O2 rich blood to the other cells of the body, when the left ventricle contracts, it forces open the aortic valve. When the aortic valve opens, it blocks the openings to the coronary arteries. So when the left ventricle contracts during ventricular systole and O2 rich blood is being sent to the other cells of the body, blood flow through the coronary arteries is being cut off. But what are the two things that muscle can do? It can contract and relax. And when the left ventricle relaxes, that backflow pressure of blood in the aorta is going to snap that aortic valve shut, and then that oxygenated blood that's in the aorta will be allowed to flow through the coronary arteries and feed it. That's how the coronary arteries, or the myocardium, receives its blood supply. Now this is important when you look at somebody with heart disease, for example. So let's say, for example, that they have cholesterol buildup in this coronary artery. Right? So this is all cholesterol plaque buildup, atherosclerosis. So this vessel right here is going to have increased resistance to blood flow. Why? Because the hole is smaller. Because plaque is building up, cholesterol is building up in there. So when does the heart muscle, the myocardium, receive its oxygenated blood? During ventricular diastole. So if somebody has cholesterol building up in their coronary artery, this artery is going to have more resistance to blood flow. So when the heart is relaxed and that backflow pressure of blood, where does arterial blood always go? It goes to the path of least resistance. So the vast majority of that oxygenated blood is going to travel to the right coronary artery and not the left. So the part of the heart that's being perfused by this left coronary artery, which is a large part of the left side of the heart, is going to become ischemic. Ischemia means lack of blood flow. And if the heart is ischemic, if you cut off blood supply to any part of the body, the first thing that's going to happen is you are going to get pain. So these people get chest pain. Why are they getting chest pain? Because there is lack of blood flow to that area of the heart. Now, if that lack of blood flow persists, then that part of the heart can die. And if that blood flow isn't reestablished, then they get death of heart tissue, which is called a myocardial infarct or heart attack. So, now watch. When does oxygenated blood flow through the coronary arteries? Well, when the heart muscle is relaxed. So, a lot of times you can't determine if somebody has blockages in their coronary arteries while they're at rest. Why? Because when you're at rest, if each little dash represents when the left ventricle is contracting, all of this time between beats is when blood is flowing through the coronary arteries. And even in an artery that's blocked up with cholesterol at rest, you can still send enough oxygenated blood to that heart so that you're not going to get pain. Well, what do? They stress your heart. So when they stress your heart by giving you a stress test, what happens? You get an increased heart rate and an increased force of contraction of the heart, right? Meaning an increase in the systolic blood pressure. So if your heart rate is high and your systolic blood pressure is high, that means your heart has to work more. And in order for that muscle to contract, it needs oxygen. Where does it get the oxygen from? It gets it from the coronary arteries. So if your heart rate goes up and your heart is working harder, what happens to the amount of time that the coronary arteries are going to be getting blood flow between each beat? That time is now significantly reduced. So this is why they will give someone a stress test. They give someone a stress test to increase the amount of oxygen the heart is demanding. And what they want to see is, can the coronary arteries supply it? So if you can't supply enough oxygenated blood to the heart muscle, then that heart muscle will become ischemic and you will get chest pain. So if a person, if they know, has blockages of cholesterol in their coronary arteries, do you want their heart to work hard? Do you want their heart rate and their systolic blood pressure going up? Of course you don't. So that's why anyone with known coronary artery disease is placed on a medicine called a beta blocker. Because a beta blocker does two things. Beta blockers prevent epinephrine from binding to beta-1 receptors in the heart. So if you prevent epinephrine from binding to beta-1 receptors in the heart, that will lead to a decrease in heart rate, and it will lead to a decrease in the force of contraction of the heart, which will lead to a drop in systolic blood pressure. So if your heart is working less hard because you're on a beta blocker, that means it requires less oxygenated blood flow. And if you got plaques in your coronary arteries, that's exactly what you want to happen. So that's why a stress test is performed, and that's why anyone with known coronary artery disease are placed on beta blockers. because you want to reduce the workload of the heart and therefore reduce the chances of them becoming ischemic.